Do you think until like the AI catches up to being able to find this content, do you think that getting rid of explicit content is an easier path for them to go? So then it's just none of it's available, or do you think that there's still going to be a way for people to be posting this kinds of
It's a
abuse
really good
material?
question. Nobody's ever asked me that question.
Mhm.
Getting rid of the willing adult content would be the fastest and easiest way to remove all child sexual abuse material and human trafficking from Twitter or, Pornhub. But like you said before, it won't solve the problem. It'll be putting a Band-Aid on it. My solutions to this problem that I push for constantly have a more human-centered focus. I just want everybody to be safe. I don't want the willing adult entertainers to not be able to feed their family, or God forbid. One thing I've talked about a lot is that if we pull down these big sites, like we saw with Backpage, when Backpage went down, which was a cesspool, like I was trafficked on Backpage, you know what I mean? I know there was folks that made a living off Backpage, cool, whatever. I was trafficked on Backpage. That's my experience. We did see a spike in online human trafficking, things like that. We have to be very conscientious when we just pull down everything all at once. What we don't want to do is increase human trafficking and exploitation. So if your main primary source of income is coming from these, like, let's say like you're using Twitter as your main source to hustle, right? If your hustle's taken down instantly, that leaves you at a higher risk to being trafficked. That's what we don't want. We want these platforms to do the right thing without destroying more lives. So the best thing to do is start with removing the human rights violations first. Then we can talk about the other stuff. But my goal would be to not have to remove the willing adult entertainers stuff too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's obviously like best case scenario.
Best case. I hope they do that.
Yeah, what's interesting to me, because there are some organizations that are very anti-porn, very anti-sex work, and they tie it to these humanitarian issues. And I think they're vastly different things. And if you kind of compare it to what's happening with like the drug wars right now, or what's been happening with the drug wars, it's almost like when you make a thing illegal, and this obviously doesn't apply to children because that's always illegal. That's never okay. Obviously, kids can't consent, but I'm just talking about adults. When you make things illegal, is you tend to make those things a lot more violent and a lot more underground.
Yes.
I was listening to Johan Hari, and he has the book Lost Connections, and he focuses a lot on drugs, addiction, and depression. And he was explaining, he was making the comparison to alcohol. And he's like, well, you don't see violent gangsters like Smirnoff and Bud Light going at each other because they're competitors. You used to see that with Al Capone when it was illegal. And that's why you see all of this happening with the cartel, is because it's illegal. If something happens, they can't call the police. And well, maybe in Mexico, but you can't call the police and say, hey, I need help because so-and-so just like broke into my shop. So you start creating the thing that you're trying to avoid. And I can't help but relate that to sex work. It's by making it illegal for consenting adults to kind of do what they want behind closed doors. You are kind of giving the power to these traffickers because there's no other. Obviously, there are some people that are doing it above ground a little bit, but you are making it harder, I think. And then you're.
So I don't. I don't. Unfortunately, I. It's not that I don't care. It's just I like to just stick to, child sexual abuse, human trafficking, human rights violations. If willing adult sex workers want to advocate for, whatever they want to advocate for, that's fine. To me, it's not really. I get what you're saying. I would prefer we focus on the human rights violations first. Mm-hmm. That's how I feel. I get what you're saying. I mean, listen. Prohibition's never worked. Just so you're saying, it's always increased it. The war on drugs was a complete failure. I think what we found is that meeting people where they're at, and also too, I'm very libertarian, very Michael Malice. I'm actually past libertarian. I don't even like to say libertarian. I'm a very like Michael Malice thinking as far as political stuff goes. Like but we always draw the line at human rights violations, right?
Mhm.
And that I feel like everybody can agree on, like even, anybody, everybody. And the thing about the drug trade is, we lost it. We lost the war on drugs. We had to start doing things a little differently and started doing harm reduction. And that is kind of what we do sometimes when we talk to survivors. So like in my particular case, harm reduction worked really well in getting me out once and for all against my abuser.
What's harm reduction?
So harm reduction, when you talk about, drug folks that are struggling with addiction, you start off and it's sort of, I don't know, I guess it's a little different, but it's like, you start off with like, okay, do you have clean, needles to use with? Do you have somewhere clean to do this? Are you, you lower the risk of something deadly to happen, because if the person's dead, there's no chance in coming back. Right. Mm-hmm. So you just lower the risk of dying. So, when we talk about harm reduction with, human trafficking, if you go back, do you have a safety plan to leave? Does someone else know where you are? It just, we go through, we basically play the movie forward and just make sure it's as less deadly as possible until that survivor is in a space where they're ready to choose to leave once and for all.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the connection I was trying to make. It's like we said earlier, it's if the problem with sting operations is that you are arresting the girl, which doesn't make sense to me at all, especially if she's a victim.
That's it for this week's episode. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate and review, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can also share this podcast with a friend. It helps my podcast grow, and I really appreciate it. I hope